Welcome to today's webinar and our meeting of the Massachusetts AITC. I'm thrilled to welcome Dr. Alex Glazebrook, who's the Vice President of Program Operations at OATS, so Older Adult Technology Services from AARP. And part of their work is the Senior Planet Digital Literacy Programs. Alex earned a BA, Master's of Social Work, and PhD from Stony Brook University with a focus on aging and investigating ways technology influences health outcomes in older adults. So he's a perfect fit for giving us context in the types of topics we're interested in. And he specifically leads a team that delivers technology training and evaluates emerging tools so older adults can learn, connect, and thrive in today's world. So I want to welcome him as he shares insights on how technology can transform the way we age and support the way we age. So Alex, I'll let you take it away.
Thanks, Jenna, and thanks everyone for joining. I have a presentation for you today. Hopefully it won't be too long or too boring, but I hope it fills in some gaps about technology adoption. I'm going to do a little bit of an intro about sort of the state of seniors today. I think it's important to sort of set the stage a little bit about some of the misconceptions about what it means to grow older in the US today before kind of diving into the tech adoption and tech usage among older people that we're seeing. And then I'll talk a little bit about the work we do at Oats and Senior Planet and kind of wrap up with a view towards what we see coming at Oats in terms of the intersection between technology and aging. So I'm going to share some slides. I probably have 25, 30 minutes of presentation, and so there'll be a lot of time at the end for questions if you have them. And feel free to pop them in the chat and we can get to them afterwards as well. So like I said, this is where we're going to head today. So yeah, this is what we'll talk about, and let's dive into it. So one of the things, I'm sure most of you already know this because we're all sort of probably in the aging field or in the aging field, adjacent aging fields, is that our population is aging significantly and quickly. Currently, there's about 63 million older people in the US who are 65 and older. By 2030, that'll grow 16% to 73 million, which doesn't sound that significant, but if you see the graph on the right, the percentage of older adults, those 65 and older in the US by 2060 is projected to be 23%, or basically 1 in 4 Americans will be over the age of 65 by 2060. So this slide and the coming slides are just a little bit of stage setting so we can kind of understand what the landscape looks like and what big chunks of life older adults are facing and how they're grappling with them. This is just another slide that further conveys there's been growth across all of the age cohorts, 65 plus. You can see the biggest growth is among 65 to 74-year-olds, but all of the categories have grown from 2010 to 2020 and are continuing to do so. And the 65 to 74 age bracket is the one that is growing by percentage the most currently. And just a quick side note, if anyone, some of the slides I have annotations and the sources on, others that I don't, but I can provide any of them afterwards if people need those. So misconceptions about aging, I'm sure a lot of us don't ascribe to these, but they are real and they are very present, and they affect not only how we perceive older adults, but then in turn how older adults go about their everyday lives, and for purposes of this presentation, how they interact and use technology. So, things that we're probably familiar with is that older adults, or the belief is that in majority, older adults are physically and cognitively impaired, that a lot of them are lonely, that many of them are struggling financially, and that many of them might not be satisfied with their life, especially as it gets into later life. So most of that stuff in the broad majority is actually not accurate, and it does affect how people then live and what their intending to do with technology. There's definitely a misconception about older adults' use of technology, and that they're kind of using it to fix or correct an ailment, or using it for exclusively safety or home automation or home monitoring. And while those use cases are prevalent, which we'll see in upcoming slides, they're not necessarily the norm, and they're not necessarily what people are most fixated on as they grow old when they're using technology. So, a couple of more slides about how some of these misconceptions aren't really true. Uh, this one's probably pretty obvious because of Medicare, but and because of employer-backed pension health insurance. Older adults 65 plus, 99% have health insurance. So it's a very, very small percentage of older adults that don't have health insurance. And more importantly, most seniors do not actually report significant difficulties with activities of daily living, or some of the main categories of disability that are reported on, such as hearing, vision, and independent living. So, in the research that we've pulled and the research we've done, about three-quarters of them do not report any difficulties between the ages of 65 and 74. And more than half over 75 don't report any major impairment that's affecting their daily life. So they have health insurance, and they're actually feeling pretty healthy and are healthy objectively. So that's health. Financially, there's also a little bit of a misconception that as older adults grow older, a lot of them are struggling in poverty or having difficulty paying their bills. And it's actually not true. The official poverty rate for the 65 plus cohort is the lowest among all age cohorts, below 10%. Now, again, which we'll talk about later, and I'm not going to paint a completely rosy picture. I will finish with some sort of challenges to this, but most older adults are actually living financially pretty well. Home ownership is quite high. You can see in this graph that almost 80% of people 65 and older own a home, which is the highest rate of any age group. That may seem obvious, as people, bought houses in their younger years, and are now hanging on to that asset. But it's still, from a financial standpoint, tends to show a good foundation. Socially, again, another belief that a lot of people have is that older adults are isolated, they lack companionship, and they're, very alone. Like, loneliness and actually being objectively isolated are two different things. I'm sure a lot of us know that, but the bulk of older adults 65 plus are not socially isolated and are not alone. Again, these percentages are a little less promising, but still, you can see that most are not feeling those ways. Satisfaction and happiness actually peaks, as you can see in this graph, around age 74. This is often called like the U curve or the U bend of life satisfaction. So what's interesting is you can see, as people are in their 30s and 40s, we kind of actually have a lull towards mid 50s of happiness, and then it gets progressively higher from there. There is some very late life trail off, as people may get acutely ill or have significant impairment, 74, 75 plus, but people are actually pretty happy and pretty satisfied with life as they age. And then finally, the other thing too is older adults are very engaged. They vote a lot. They're the most reliable voting bloc. I'm sure we always hear that in the elections, but it's true. You can see here in the graphs, the individuals who voted. The 65 plus group, if you take the 45 to 64 group and kind of take the upper end of that plus the 65 plus, there's a significant percentage of seniors who are voting, which not only shows engagement and vitality, but also shows a desire to keep connected and contributing, which is another misconception I think we often see with older adults, is that there's sort of a lack of desire or a lack of what word am I looking for? A lack of thrust behind their lives as they age, and that's really not what we see. The people that we are interacting with, especially too, are very energized and invigorated at the prospect of what's coming. And I know voting is not necessarily the most exciting thing, but it's sort of an underlying factor that demonstrates connection and engagement. So that's all the positives. There are uh, challenges. Everything is not positive as we age. I won't go through all of these, but um, there are significant things that change as we age. We all know that obesity and health can be, comorbidities that obviously relate together. We're seeing rises in mental health issues among older adults. There's a lot of suicide and suicidal ideation, especially among men in later life, especially when they have spousal death. And there are disparities in race and gender in terms of poverty and health that are important to look at. Uh, and a lot of older adults, although they are insured, some of them are not completely covered. That's why things like Medicare Advantage or other Medigap plans exist to cover that. So older adults are using a lot of the healthcare resources, and it can, for those who are not financially stable, put them into significant financial distress. Um, and there's a few more on here I won't go through, but I talk about this stuff quickly at the beginning just to kind of set a little bit of the stage of what's going on in aging and what the reality is, of at least of what we're seeing. And now that will sort of transition into tech and tech adoption. And you'll see that a lot of the things that I was just talking about in terms of trends show up in technology use. So if health, et cetera, financial independence and security, et cetera, all show up in people's interest and use of technology in aging. So the next few slides are work that was done in partnership with our AARP research team, who does a lot of surveying nationally to understand lots of myriad issues that older adults face. And they do a significant amount of research on technology use trends among older adults. And I thought they would be really relevant here to share. So you can see here that these are considered new tech. Some of us might not really think that, but what you see here is there's a lot of older adults using tech that you might not think of. So smart home tech is being used extensively by older adults, home safety tech, mobility tech, and even brain health tech. Although you can see there's not a lot of usage, there's a lot of interest, which leads you to believe that there needs to be more facilitation and education about how that can be used to get people to adopt it. And there's even a significant amount of people using tech for caregiving. So, this is what I would say is more at the front lines or bleeding edge of tech and older adults, where adoption patterns are actually quite strong, despite what the public may believe. And the interest and use of smart home tech has increased. So again, smart home tech is not really new anymore. There are new smart home technologies that are very novel and very inspiring and promising. But the general concept of smart home tech is not necessarily new anymore. But older adults are buying into this. You can see the percent change year over year. It's growing in some of these categories like security, Wi-Fi extenders, appliances, lighting. And some of these may not seem super dramatic in terms of the usage patterns, but the fact that 20% of older adults have a smart light bulb or smart lighting system in their house, to me is, I think that just goes to show you where we came from. These stats would look totally different 5 years ago. I don't even have a smart light bulb in my house, or a smart outlet. This slide talks a little bit more specifically about brain health, which I think is an important one to kind of hone in on a little bit, because it shows two things. One, older adults are interested in brain health and they want to use tech to do it, but they're not currently using it. And two, it kind of underscores the fact that health is a prominent and very, very important part of an older adult's life as they age. Uh, AARP and OATS, we have a lot of resources on brain health, but there's a little bit of a disconnect between interest and usage, as you can see in this graph. But it's definitely an area for continued exploration and uh, driving of resources. And this is also health related, but I thought it was important to bring up because I think a lot of people believe that the health of older adults and the tech they use to manage their health is, I said at the beginning, home monitoring, devices to prevent falls, stuff like that. But you can see here the largest category here for health apps or health technology is health tracking for fitness or for wellness, if you will, followed by fitness classes. This shows the breakdown between if they've used it versus whether or not it's been used specifically for health and wellness. But it just kind of, again, underscores, I think, an important dynamic that's going on with older adults in that they're most older adults are actually very active and they're very, very concerned with their health, their independence, their mobility. And they want to use tech to do things like count their steps, check their heart rate, run, an EKG with their Apple Watch. And this just sort of explores that a little bit, what the top uses for digital services or tech are. And then chronic issues with, health specific tech to manage them or to monitor them have grown a lot. Again, this is between used for health and wellness versus used at all. And what you see here is that there's a dramatic uh, percentage of older adults using it for health tracking and fitness. There are, as you go down the list here, other services used for health and wellness, chronic health management. Um, but then it's also interspersed with things like gaming, communication, etc. So it's an interesting mixture of use, specifically in the health and wellness domain. And obviously, medical services that are listed here, there's like Life Alert and other things that are more in terms of what I would say um, health security devices or health monitoring devices that are actually providing, wraparound security for older adults or sense of perceived security. This is more about the activities and things that they're doing kind of on a day-to-day basis and how that relates to what they want to be doing. And I think this is, if out of all the slides in terms of tech trends, this may be one of the most powerful. What this shows here is that older adults are actually keeping pace with the age 50 plus, their counterparts, basically. Um, and it's really interesting to see because when Oates first started in 2004, the internet was still kind of a novel concept. These would look totally different. Some of these technologies were not even available at that time, but mobile phone usage among older adults when I first started at Oates about 12 years ago was somewhere around like 12%. And now 91% have a smartphone. And they're keeping pace with 18 to 49-year-olds on some key categories of technology: smart TVs, tablets, wearables, home assistants, and smart home. So I would say that a lot of these uh, differences are negligible, honestly, and you can even see in some categories like the tablet, um, the 50 plus population is actually using them more frequently than the younger generations, and that's likely because of smartphone usage. But this is a very interesting slide to me, and it just sort of, I think, again demonstrates how older adults are kind of keeping abreast of new technologies and they're using it for really important things that help them manage and uh, live more connected lives. And this is kind of a follow on to the previous slide, which is a little bit about ownership. You can see device ownership or usage of devices has increased among all age cohorts, 50, 59, 60, 69, etc. We're just starting to get 80 plus data, which they still lag behind as you can probably put together. The older you get, the more unlikely it is to use technology. And you can kind of see that in these graphs. Basically, there's a pretty um, common decrease in usage or ownership of these technologies as you go into each new age cohort. And this one, relating back to my introduction about social connection, is important because this is just a attitudinal statement asking people whether or not they use technology to stay in touch with friends and family. And I mean, you can see among age 50 plus here, those that agree are 76%. So there's a huge percentage and that really honestly mirrors the 18 to 49 group that are using technology to stay in touch with friends and family. And social connection is one of the most important markers of health as we get older. If you're in, the literature, you're in kind of this space, you've probably heard that quote from a research study that was done probably 5 or 10 years ago now, that being socially isolated uh, in older life is the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes per day. I think that was like a catchy top line that really kind of went everywhere in academia and specifically as it relates to aging. But how true that is, I don't know. But this is showing that technology is a key way for older adults to sort of combat that disconnection, if they are disconnected at all. Because if you remember at the beginning of the presentation, I mentioned that we really are not seeing the levels of disconnection and loneliness and isolation that we once thought were prevalent. So, what factors influence technology adoption? There's a bunch. We believe there's a couple of key ones, and I thought this source here that I pulled from BMC was, a powerful summary of those things. Number one, people need training and education. That's what OATS does with our senior planet programs. Um, Physical and mental health plays a role. So seniors who report that they have a disability are less likely than those who do not to utilize a variety of digital assets. So that's really interesting to me. I think there's a lot more work that needs to be done on the linkages between physical and mental health as it relates to older adult just longevity and well-being, not specifically technology. Um, there's a big trust component, and that even starts before safety and privacy with the device itself. Do they trust the manufacturer? Do they trust that they can even have the skills that are needed to use the device? Then once they get it, there's a huge amount burden in getting over safety and privacy concerns that older adults have with the use of new technology, putting their information into a device or putting it online or setting up an electronic health record are all really important factors. Cost and affordability are definitely important. It's not only that, uh, it says here that it implicates others factors that influence adoption and educational attainment and income level of the individual are also related. But what we see is people want a device that works for them. And if they can afford, if price is not the main issue, what they wind up targeting is a device that has the most user intuitive interface and functionality. And then we look at things like educational attainment and income level to then sort of determine what device might be most practical. So it does play a role, but typically, if older adults can afford what is mainstream and what is best, that's what they will opt for. And then finally, there's two categories here: ease of use and availability. Ease of use is sort of related to the previous one, but is the device capable? Is it convenient? Is it clear to use? And does it have good accessibility features? Apple and iOS is notorious for having really, really fantastic accessibility features on many of their devices, and that's often what we lean towards, although they are very expensive. And then second to this availability, broadband is still an issue. A lot of us who live in cities or in, populous suburbs don't ever really think about internet connection being a factor. It definitely is, especially if you live in rural parts of the state or the country. And the cost for broadband is another issue for older adults that they have to grapple with. So these are kind of the main factors that influence adoption. And we talked a little bit or for a bit about technology trends that we're seeing. And now we're going to pivot a little bit into talking about what we do at Oats and sort of the practical solutions that we are delivering to help people learn and get connected to new technologies and what they're using those for. So I'm going to kind of gallop through those so it doesn't feel like too much of a sales pitch because that's not the intention. There's a lot of groups out there now, both nonprofit and for profit, that are delivering tech training for seniors. We're just one of them. But I wanted to kind of quickly overview where we started and where we are now. So we've been around since 2004. We really began delivering in-person programs to small groups of older adults in New York City. That went on for about 10 years, and then we launched what is known as Senior Planet. That's basically our program and customer-facing brand. So all of our programs are labeled Senior Planet, and that's how older adults see our branding and likeness show up. We had some growth throughout New York City, and then we expanded to Plattsburgh, Maryland, Florida, and California in 2015 through about 2018. 2018, we moved into Texas and Colorado. We built some more Senior Planet centers, which are actual physical locations for people to explore and use technology. And then we had some large grants that helped us go national and pivot our in-person model to an in-person and digital model, which was definitely accelerated somewhat by COVID and our need to evolve like everyone was at that time. And around that time, we affiliated with AARP. We became a charitable affiliate of the AARP enterprise. And what that did is basically unlock millions of older adults for us to connect to and all of the shared services and power that AARP brings for us to scale our vision and mission. And we are continuing to do that work today with AARP. It helped give birth to our licensing initiative, which allows entities to deliver our work on the ground, which I'll talk a little bit more in a minute. And we're continuously working throughout all 50 states to bring our programs to more and more communities. I already talked about this, but the affiliation with AARP brought our expertise, merged our value, and then brought AARP scale together to create our organization as it is now. Some of the just key notable facts about what we do, or who we are, we're a 501c3. Senior Planet is our program and main customer-facing brand. We have a pretty significant impact model and research evaluation paradigm that kind of undergirds everything we do, which I'll talk about for a minute. We have 3 program channels, and we're an AARP affiliate. So Senior Planet, what is it? It's aging with attitude. That's been our tagline since the brand launched in 2012. And we just believe it's the manifestation of kind of what we talked about on those early slides. It's older adults growing old and evolving and doing new things and using technology to do that. It's a little bit of a cheeky slogan, but we think it kind of captures what we're trying to do with our mission and vision. These are the 3 program channels I mentioned. We have Senior Planet centers 2 in New York, 1 in Miami, 1 in Denver. We have licensing partners all across the country who franchise essentially our curriculum and programs and deliver those programs locally on the ground in their communities. And then we also deliver virtual programs live, online, and asynchronously. These are just some pictures of the centers. We just launched our center in Miami last year, and we are about to relaunch our New York City center. So if you ever happen to be in Miami, New York City, Plattsburgh, or Denver, definitely stop by one of our locations so you can see what they are. They're really intended to be spaces for people to come take our programs, learn, but build community. So you can see our Miami Center. Actually, the labels are flipped, but our Miami Center on the left-hand side, it's really a community space. It's not meant to feel like a training factory or a place where you're getting education necessarily. It's a place you would want to hang out in, and that's sort of the environment we try to build in these centers. Our online programs cover pretty much anything you could ever imagine under the sun. They're all free. There's somewhere between 10 and 15 programs happening uh, every day, Monday through Saturday. We have multiple languages available: Spanish, Mandarin, and a little bit of Vietnamese. And there's also a tremendous amount of content on our website that uh, includes articles, asynchronous videos, discussion groups, comments, a whole lot for people to stay connected. We also run a toll-free hotline, again, free. You can call in this number, any questions, and this is a way that we've helped thousands, hundreds of thousands of older adults get over a very small tech challenge or issue that's completely stopping them from going the next step deeper in their tech learning. It's a great resource that we developed during COVID and it still exists today. I won't play this video, but our licensing program is a great option for people or entities that need tech programming. We have all the curriculum. We have hundreds and hundreds of offerings in multiple languages that we license. We train people how to use, and then we empower people to deliver. This is a map currently of where those partners are. Trying to get into all 50 states by the end of this year. Hopefully we'll be able to do that. And this program is a way in which we've been able to expand our work, put programs on the ground, and create impact in those communities without having to send our staff all around the country. This wheel just demonstrates our methodology. I won't read through all of it because it's a little complex and confusing, but the main headings are important. We have an extensive experience doing this, and our approach is based in research and adult learning theory. We couple that with a really sound training methodology and infuse the unique qualities of older adults and what they tell us into this methodological approach to our work and our curriculum and our programs. As I mentioned before, we've been doing this since 2004. I think we were the first group that was really doing any kind of serious tech training for older adults, and that's since evolved into what it is now. Here's a look at our programs sort of by type and by language. We're trying to diversify the amount of offerings we have in different languages. And we offer a whole assortment of different programs, some that are very intensive, like our courses, which are for foundational skills, then others, lectures and workshops that are for single issues or single topics, like how to use Zoom or how to change the settings on your iPhone. And then we have some asynchronous tech tip videos and live demos. And from all of our programs, or in all of our programs, they're based on impact areas, which, as you might notice, relate back to those initial slides I was talking about earlier, in that older adults want to use technology to do a lot. And these are the 5 main themes that we see. There's a heavy emphasis or interest in health and wellness and social engagement. Creative expression is right up there with them, not quite as high. And then There's interest in financial security and civic participation, but it's a lower percentage. But our programs, although they're tech-centered, all are bent towards one or more of these impact areas, so you'll be able to see how one of our programs is making you healthier or how it's increasing social engagement. Technology is really just the hook that helps us and the tool that helps people get there. And this breaks down our materials by impact area. Foundational are device basics, things that you need really at the outset to get started. And there's still, as you can see, a third of our materials are still focused on that because it's still a pretty big area of need. And we also have a large online free community. It's basically sort of a Facebook for older adults without ads, and it's free. And there's dozens of groups on there. You can see some of them here: music, brain health, recipes, pet lovers, for people to go in, talk to each other, post, without the fear of any ads or any security risks or being, targeted by anybody. We own the portal and platform, and we control who is able to be in there. And we also have a podcast that helps sort of reframe a lot of the topics I brought up earlier, in that we believe older adults as they age change and do new things. And this podcast is all about thinking differently about aging. So we have special guests every episode who come and talk to us about aging and especially its intersection with technology. After participating in our programs, older adults are feeling better. We measure a lot more than just this, but these are some of the things we pay most attention to. There's more connectedness, feel better equipped to find things online, feel less alone, and feel more connected. And that's just through the program interventions themselves. This is important because it speaks a little bit back to some of the stats I was talking about earlier, but I didn't talk about this because I knew this slide was coming. I mentioned that broadband is still an issue. Broadband is in-home wireline, meaning you have an actual cable running into your home access, internet access. There are people around the country who are relying on satellite, and sometimes Dish still provides some sort of internet, but it's not reliable. It's often weather dependent, and the speeds are slow. And in our research, this was novel research we conducted ourselves. We see that 22 million American seniors, that's 65 plus, lack that type of broadband access at home, which is tremendous and really significant. So we've partnered with different groups to try and understand what we can do to help, but it's a very complex issue. And what's most important to consider and to take away from this is that as certain factors keep attaching to this digital divide, as you can see here, Black and Latino seniors are more than 2.5 and 3.3 times more likely to be offline, and Medicaid enrollees similar. It's showing you that there's almost comorbidities, if you will, of being on the digital divide, meaning disconnected. So those who are already disadvantaged or are not getting the services that they normally should are potentially also disconnected from the internet and maybe do not have wireline broadband access at home. And we think it's just a really important policy area for continued research and work and effort. And it's something that we've been trying to address with different partners for a long time. Some information about where we are and how you can get in touch with us if you're so interested. And these I won't read, but we also believe that stories are a really important part of our work. So we always are collecting impact stories and kind of understanding how technology is not just a tool, but a powerful instrument for changing life as we age. So, people are using this to recertify for housing benefits if they live in public housing. They're setting up online banking and mobile banking so they don't have to travel to their local branch, or maybe their local branch has closed down. They're doing telehealth and things like doctors on demand at home, communicating with their health providers. They're FaceTiming and staying connected with their friends and family. And they're taking control of their health with different wearables like Fitbit and Apple and Whoop. There's a lot out there that older adults are using technology for, and that comes out in the stories we collect from them. So, in wrapping up with all of this, where are we headed? I think there's a lot of places we're headed with technology as it intersects with aging. I think we're all aware of just how quickly technology is evolving. It's probably at a pace now that is the fastest it's ever been, depending on the sector you're looking at. And as you saw in some of those earlier slides, older adults are buying into new technologies. They are interested. They want to use them for the same things that their younger counterparts want to use them for. And they are following what we call a diffusion of innovation pattern or model. So there's a bunch of literature out there about the diffusion of innovation. And what that means is, as a new technology first becomes widely available, let's say, there's always the first adopters, which are kind of at the center of that circle. And then there are concentric circles that build out from those first adopters. And older adults are typically 3, 4, 5, 6 rungs of circles out from those early adopters. So what that means is technology doesn't get to older adults as quickly as it does to younger groups. And that may or may not be a problem. Why it could be an issue is that as technology evolves so rapidly, it's hard for older adults to keep up because they may not be adopting the newest tech as quickly as younger people are. And before they do, new versions and new iterations kind of pop up. And it's most important when there's new big broad categories or really novel developments of technology that emerge, because if older adults don't buy in early enough, it sometimes becomes too hard to catch up. And I think with things like AI and some other emerging tech we're kind of keeping an eye on, that diffusion of innovation concern is becoming a little bit more relevant and probably will play more of a role in the lives of older adults, and their use and adoption of technology in the next like 5 to 10 years. Things we're looking at, these are all things I've mentioned because these fields are changing really rapidly. So, although smart home technologies, for instance, have been around forever, there's a lot going on in home monitoring, as I'm sure a lot of you know, and home assistants that can really make, and sorry, there's a typo on here, but I should say smart home. Um, it really can make a huge difference in people's lives and change their ability and their uh, capability of living independently. So we're paying a lot of attention there. Health tech, we're paying a lot of attention to that again because it's the single most important issue for older adults as they age is health, and technology use and health are highly correlated patterns of use among older adults. So we're doing a tremendous amount with wearables, telehealth. Home fitness is huge. We have a huge contingent of people that are exercising and tracking and monitoring their health at home. And then, sort of on the more medical side, we're looking at the developments of more universal health portals and electronic health records to keep everybody on the same medical journey, if you will. It's very difficult right now to have your care managed by multiple providers when you're an older adult if they're not in the same network. But there's a lot going on there that I think in the next, it could take a while, could take 10 years, but there will be a point where you'll be able to really flawlessly and seamlessly manage your health online. AI, can't really not mention that. Older adults are really curious about AI. They're scared of it from what we've heard in the focus groups we've done, but they are using it. And they're using it for things that, I think a lot of people are using AI at work for productivity. There's some of that, But older adults are really using it to learn and to be creative and to have fun. A lot of the prompting we see older adults doing in things like ChatGPT are just for fun or just to learn something. It's not necessarily so productivity fixated. And then finally, social connection, I think, is another emerging field for older adults. No one has really completely cracked the code in terms of keeping older adults connected online and building community, I think, in a way that feels like it was created with and for older adults. We're trying to do that with Senior Planet Community. AARP has a group that's really exploded in popularity called the Ethels, which is actually a closed Facebook group. So the technology there is simple, but what it's done is created an ability for people to connect online, only older adults, and then meet up in person in local communities, sort of like a meetup group, but only for older people and only around specific issues. So these are kind of the main areas we're paying attention to. There's obviously a lot more going on with tech, but when we think about the things that are most important as it relates to aging, this is what we're paying attention to. Um, and I think in closing, I would say that there's a lot of exciting developments going on in the intersection between aging and technology. I tried to sort of demonstrate that technology use is really, really prevalent. It's increasing among all age cohorts, like older age cohorts. And the things they're using it for are not necessarily the classical or societal things that people believe they're using them for. They're using it to just live like we all do. And I think if we can step back sometimes and think a little bit about those dynamics and that older people are just people, and it's really important to kind of keep that center of mind when you're thinking about working with older adults in tech, is understanding where are they at, what do they want to use technology to accomplish, and how can we help them. So that was all I have for the presentation. So thank you all for listening.
Well, thanks so much, Alex. I appreciate the kind of reflections from someone who's on the ground a bit and bringing back to reality. I have several questions, but I'll open it up for folks who want to raise their hands. We did have Doug put in the chat that this was a great overview. And have you started discussing within your organization how policy changes or the tariffs might increase the cost of technology when that's already an issue for older adults?
Yeah, we have. I mean, I'm sure a lot of us are seeing on the news that iPhones might start costing, I think, $3,600 was the quote that I saw. And it, could affect all technology. We are talking about it, and we do work with the AARP policy team to kind of understand those dynamics. I think it's probably honestly a little too soon to tell how it's going to play out. But what may wind up happening is that especially older adults that may be on fixed incomes may be opting for technologies that are cheaper and are maybe not as functional because they can't afford them anymore. I do think that's a possibility.
Well, thanks. Natish?
Alex, thanks so much for this great talk. I'm one of the co-directors of Mass AITC, and it's this sort of on, as Jenna very well put it, on the ground perspective of what seniors are really grappling with is sort of very much level setting, especially when we think often aspirationally about what's the latest, greatest thing, and when in fact some of the struggles are much more basic than that.
Yeah.
And I think the focus of your work really amplifies that, to some extent, the disconnect between what I've often called in our group whiz bang technology and stuff that is really necessary and that people aspire to use. With that said, there's been a huge landscape change with generative AI over the past couple of years, and so my question is really, it's sort of multifold, and you can take any part of this that you want. But I'm really sort of curious about how you are thinking about both the promise but also the peril, especially in groups of individuals who may be more vulnerable to phishing, scams, financial fraud, even sort of physical hallucination from an instrument that causes hallucination itself in a technical way. And that seems to be front of mind for many of us who are sort of on the edges of technology development. I'm just curious if that's something that you as a group are beginning to grapple with.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, something I didn't really talk about too much in my presentation is that next to health, the number one other concern people have when they're older about using tech is privacy and security. And AI, I think, is riddled with those challenges, a lot of them that we don't even understand at this point. And the sophistication that is coming from AI, romance scams, voice modulation, all of those things that are really developing quickly are scary and unfortunately are targeting older adults at a very much higher rate than other age demographics. So our approach to that is education and empowerment. I think what winds up happening is with any technology, honestly, is there's people believe that older adults sometimes should be kept from technology or insulated or taught to use it in ways that keep them safe. And we believe the opposite is true. You need complete exposure, as much education as you possibly can, because younger demographics are more than competent to, more than capable of, addressing or identifying some kind of AI scam or something else that is nefarious. So how do they do that? Use and education. So our approach to that is probably different than others. You see a lot of technology out there that we say has been dumbed down for older adults, like big buttons, limited menus. And I know your question specifically about AI, but I think it applies in that we want people to use this stuff and we want to be there to support them, put them in the driver's seat, and let them mess up maybe in simulations so they don't make those mistakes in real life. And if they need help, there should be supports there for them, which is what we try and do with our hotline and other things. All that being said, AI is a huge issue. AARP runs something called the Fraud Watch Network, and they are getting inundated with AI scams that are targeting older adults right now. It's like the main thing they're facing. So, it's a good question. Our approach again is exposure and education.
No, thanks so much, Alex. I have one question in the chat and then I'll go to Margie and then Deepak. So Amar says, I'm curious if there's a process for technology developers to partner with sites to do any kind of piloting or feedback, that kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely reach out to me. We do that a lot. We also work, AARP has something called the Age Tech Collaborative, if you're not familiar with it, which is a large collaborative of companies. A lot of them are startups that do this work, and we often are the focus group partner.
Perfect. That was a straightforward answer. Margie?
Yes. Hi. Thank you for that great talk. I really thoroughly enjoyed everything you talked about. I have one clarification question and then a broader question. Just to clarify, a lot of the trends you presented were really impressive. I wonder about the sample though. Is that from basically AARP members or is it a broader population sample?
Yeah, the tech trends, Margie, were all from AARP. So anything related to tech was AARP. And then the other ones are interspersed. Some of them are Pew, some of them are AARP, and then some of them are our own research. If you had questions about any specific ones, I could send you the citations.
I just thought that possibly part of the positive trend of so much adoption and few age differences and so on could be because this is a select group of people who joined AARP. So I was just curious about that. It's still really interesting and informative. So my other question has to do with sort of generational differences versus age differences. So, a lot of the older people you're studying are baby boomers, right? But then, the younger end, the people in their 50s are Gen X. And, Gen X they're not really digital natives. They didn't grow up with technology, but they've adopted it a lot sooner than baby boomers did. So I'm just wondering, to what extent, the adoption patterns are, they're going to change, aren't they? And are you thinking about, as millennials who are, now entering their 40s, they'll be 50 before long. They know about technology and they're using it already. So is this really an aging thing that you're focusing on, or is it really just generational, that you're dealing with baby boomers who have been reluctant to use technology and now finally they're starting to adopt it? And I just wonder if you've thought about that at all.
No, I think it's a great question. I mean, when Oates was first founded, they, used to ask our founder, what are you going to do in 5 years when everyone knows how to use the internet? And then 5 years went by and they said, what are you going to do, when everyone learns how to use Facebook or whatever it was? And I do think you're right. It is generational, but it's aging as well, because as the generations age into being older adults, the technology is changing simultaneously. So, I mean, even people now who, let's say, are in their late 40s and are completely technologically competent and are digitally literate, when they become 60, that diffusion of innovation stuff I talked about happens very quickly, and they're not staying abreast to what's changing. And that's where I think the education, like our work and all the people that work on digital literacy for older adults, will continue to have a lot of import, because I think it'll actually create more need because the technology will change faster. And as you're aging into older age demographics, the technology is definitely aging faster than you are.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great point.
Faster.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Thanks. Deepak, maybe one last question.
Yeah, thank you, Alex, for the talk. So I'll keep this quick, and maybe this is just a comment, but I just wanted to point out and build on the question from earlier from the chat that, when we think about incentivizing technologies that are specifically designed for older adults, you don't have that, as you mentioned, the kind of the early adopter to, or the younger folks usually, and I think you said that the older folks, older adults are usually fifth or the sixth rung or farther out, right? So you don't have that luxury of going through the early adopters. And so it becomes really important to have training. And I think a lot of the pilot projects being supported under this umbrella of our center are also of that category where they might have an early stage technology, but that scaling out, you don't have the natural, especially if it's specifically designed for older adults, you do need that training pipeline. So I am curious how you're thinking about it, but I am also hoping that you might fill the gap or, be a partner for some of our pilot projects.
Yeah, of course, we'd love to. And I think, the way you break that diffusion of innovation paradigm is you put older adults in the center during the development of new technologies, and not only tech that's designed for being designed for older adults, but and also when a new emerging piece of tech is being developed, the only stakeholder group should not be 18 to 49-year-olds. You need
that is one part of it, but there's also, even after the technology is developed, there's a training pipeline that's needed.
Yeah, of course. And then, so right, what I was talking about is the front end, and then the back end, of course, there needs to be more education and training, and that leads to adoption. It was the first thing I had on that slide about adoption. It's the most important. So
thank you.
No, thanks. Alex, this has been fantastic, and I really appreciate the time that you've spent with us today, talking about the work that you're doing. So thank you again for coming and talking with us.
Thanks, everybody.